Hi everyone, thanks for visiting my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Carol and I'm so glad that you stopped by. I hope you all are having a fantastic day. So today we are going to be canning up some delicious cowboy candy or candied jalapenos. And technically you can use any pepper that you desire. For this recipe, I highly recommend using a hot pepper that suits your heat level that you enjoy. The recipe does state to use jalapenos, but peppers are safely swapped out in recipes for canning, so you can technically use any pepper that you want. We have a lot of sugar going on here because the flavor profile we're going for is a sweet heat. So I don't recommend using a bell pepper, although technically you could. You do want something with a little bit of heat, I think. And I love to combine some peppers. Not everyone likes the heat of a jalapeno, but I do have some beautiful jalapenos. That's really going to be the star of the show for me. But I am going to include some banana peppers. My banana peppers are not hot ones. They don't really have heat, but they have delicious flavor. So I'm going to be using some of those. And I'm also going to be using some cubanelle. They are a beautiful lighter green color than a jalapeno, and they have a little less heat than a jalapeno. So you have options. If you like a lot of heat, you could certainly include ghost peppers, or you could use habaneros. So go by whatever heat level suits you and use those. But the combination of peppers I find is really, really nice, especially if you have people in your family. Not everyone likes a lot of heat like a jalapeno. It works well because then they can eat the cubanelle or the banana peppers instead. So this recipe comes from the Ball Fresh Preserving website. They used to have it listed as cowboy candy. It looks like to me that they've changed the name to candied jalapenos. So if you're searching for it, and I will leave a link for it in the description box below, but it is listed as candied jalapenos. It takes just a few ingredients. You want some vinegar. You need 3 cups of vinegar. You can use apple cider or white vinegar. I like to use apple cider vinegar. It just lends a little more sweetness. The flavor profile is a bit different than white vinegar. Technically, you can use any vinegar you choose as long as it's 5% acidity or more. So make sure you read the label and you are using a vinegar that is at least 5% in acidity. We need some salt. We need sugar, 6 cloves of garlic sliced. We're going to use some turmeric, cayenne powder, and mustard seeds. Those spices, you can totally leave them out. You can also adjust them. So if you want more of something, of one of those 3 in there, you can certainly adjust to your flavor profile. It's totally fine and safe to do that because we are using dried spices. The cayenne powder, if you are already on the fence about heat, I highly recommend just leaving that out altogether. The recipe does call for a half of a teaspoon of it, so there's not a lot, but it is going to lend some extra heat in our brine as well as the heat that we have in our peppers. So you might want to keep that in mind. And then we need approximately 4 pounds of peppers sliced into 1/4-inch rings. Now, I've made this recipe a lot of times, and as with a lot of Ball recipes, I always end up with more brine than I need for canning this up. So I tend to add a few more peppers. I tend to go a little over 4 pounds. So you want approximately 4 pounds of peppers measured before, or weighed before you slice them up. So we are going to get started. We're going to make our brine first, and while our brine is coming up to a boil, I am going to slice my jalapenos, and you want to slice them in approximately 1/4-inch slices. Okay guys, for our brine, we are going to use 3 cups of apple cider vinegar or white vinegar, whatever vinegar you choose. We're going to use 4 cups of sugar. Yes, you heard me correctly. It is 4 cups of sugar. Then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm using canning and pickling salt. I highly recommend using canning and pickling salt. Other types of salts can leave your brine cloudy and it doesn't look very pretty in the jar. So make sure you use a pure salt. Then we need 2 teaspoons of turmeric. We need 2 teaspoons of yellow mustard seed. And then we need about 1/2 teaspoon of the cayenne pepper powder. And again, that is to taste. Oops. So if you don't want a lot of heat, cut back on that, but you want about 1/2 teaspoon of it if you are using it. Then we're going to turn on our heat. We're going to stir all this. And we're gonna let it hang out while I'm slicing up my peppers. Now, you wanna bring it up to a boil because you wanna make sure all your sugar is dissolved, but we don't want any of it to evaporate. So what I like to do is I put my lid on so that I don't lose any of my brine. So I'm gonna go ahead, let that come up to a boil, make sure the sugar is dissolved, and while that's happening, I'm gonna chop my peppers. Okay guys, we are back. My brine has come up to a boil. So now we're ready to add our jalapenos. Now we're gonna add 6 cloves of sliced garlic first. It's kind of hard to see, I've got my light kind of bright, but you can see I've just sliced them. So we're gonna go ahead and add that. Okay, now as far as my peppers are concerned, you can see I did generous 1/4 inch slices. I did not take out the seeds or the membranes. That is something you can do if you want to, if you're concerned about the heat, but that is not something that I do. So we're gonna go ahead and add our sliced jalapenos. Actually sliced peppers. Look how beautiful, all those colors. So now what we're gonna do is we are going to bring this whole thing up to a simmer, and we wanna gently simmer our peppers for 15 minutes. So while that's happening, I'm gonna go ahead and get my canner and my jars ready. We are going to water bath or steam can this. You guys know I love steam canning. I'm gonna be steam canning, but you can water bath can it as well. So just make sure you check on it as it comes up to a simmer. Make sure all of your peppers get down inside of the brine, give them a stir. We want them to start to darken in color a little bit, and we want to simmer them for about 15 minutes. Okay, you can see that we have a nice gentle simmer going on here, and you can see some of my jalapenos are starting to get darker in color. So you just want to give them a stir to make sure that they are being simmered evenly. And we want to let it gently simmer for about 15 minutes. Ball says 15 minutes, or until they start to darken in color and you'll see them absorb some of the brine. I go just to 15 minutes. So anyway, while that's happening, make sure you get your canner and your jars ready. Okay guys, we are all set for canning. I did simmer my peppers for approximately 15 minutes. We are going to be canning in pint jars. I do not have instructions for quart jars. Ball only gives instructions for pints, so you can can this in pints, or you can go ahead and reduce down to the 8-ounce jelly jars if you want a smaller jar, but I don't have instructions for anything else. So we're gonna be processing for 15 minutes, which means we do not have to pre-sterilize our jars, our lids. So I've just washed my lids and set them aside. My jars are nice and hot. You do want to start with a hot jar for this. If you use a cold jar and put the hot jalapenos into a cold jar, you will have thermal shock and your jar will crack or break. So we don't want that. So make sure you start with a hot jar. I'm just keeping mine hot in a sink full of very hot water. My canner has 3 quarts of simmering water in the bottom of it according to my canner's instructions. Make sure you follow whatever instructions go with the canner that you are using. If you are water bath canning, you want enough simmering water in your water bath canner to cover your jars by 1 inch once the jars are submerged. So we're all set for canning. The other thing that I do want to mention is I am going to be including pickle crisp granules, also known as calcium chloride. That just helps to it helps the peppers retain more of their crunchy texture. So I highly recommend using it anytime I do pickling. I try to use pickle crisp, but it's up to you. It's optional. We're going to be using about 1/8 of a teaspoon per jar. So keep that in mind. If you want to retain as much texture to your jalapenos as possible, I highly recommend the calcium chloride. This is the ball version. It's called pickle crisp, but there are other brands make it, so you could, it's just calcium chloride. That's what you're looking for. Okay, so we are starting with 2 hot jars, like I said. So we want to use a slotted spoon, and you want to fill your jar to 1/2 inch headspace with your peppers. Okay, once you reach your 1/2 inch headspace with your peppers, then you're going to ladle in the brine over top, and you want to maintain the 1/2 inch headspace. Okay, then we're going to use our calcium chloride. We're going to use about a rounded 1/8 of a teaspoon per jar. Then we're going to take a debubbling tool, plastic butter knife, or chopstick to release your air bubbles. And make sure you are at your 1/2 inch headspace. If you need to adjust your headspace, go ahead and add more brine or peppers. Then we're going to take a paper towel, dipped in white vinegar. This brine is really sticky from all the sugar, so you're gonna make sure you take extra care in cleaning the rims of your jars. We don't want anything to interfere with a good seal. Then you are going to center your lid and add your band to fingertip tight. And then in the canner they go. Okay, I got 4-pint jars, which is about what I was expecting, but just so you know, I had about 4 1/3 pounds of peppers. So the 4 pounds of peppers, I just don't think is enough. That's just my opinion, and it's been my experience every time I've made this recipe. So I would bump it up just a little bit to really fill your jars nicely. And I still have some brine left over. I will just save it, and I'll do another batch of the peppers. That's what I do with my brine. I know I'm going to get the question, can I can up the brine? Yes, you can. You could just stick it in a jar and put it in with the rest of your ingredients if you want just a jar of brine. But you can safely save it in the fridge for another batch. So anyway, if you're water bath canning, you want to make sure you have enough water covering your jars by at least 1 inch. If you are steam canning, make sure you have the appropriate amount of water in your canner. We're going to crank our heat up to high. For water bath canning, you are going to come to a full rolling boil, and then you're going to process for 15 minutes. For steam canning, I have a dial gauge on my canner that tells me when to start timing, so just make sure you know how to use whichever canner you are using. Once you reach the full rolling boil, or you are in your green zone for the steam canning, you want to adjust your heat just to maintain the full rolling boil, or maintain to be inside of the green zone for your steam canner. Process for 15 minutes and then I'll bring you back. Okay guys, we are back. I processed for 15 minutes, and then I've let my jars cool in my canner an additional 5. With steam canning, you don't necessarily have to leave them in an additional 5 minutes, but I've learned that anytime you're dealing with a syrup that involves sugar, it's better to let them sit for a little while, an additional 5 minutes. It helps with siphoning. So anyway, here is a beautiful jar of our candied jalapenos, or candied peppers. Look how beautiful those are. Are those not so pretty? All those different colors. Now I'm thinking, if you can get your hands on some red and green jalapenos, it would make a great gift for Christmas time, right? So pretty. This is something that I have a really hard time keeping on my shelf. Everybody loves it. Anyone who comes to my house always asks me for a jar. So it is something that I think your families and your friends will enjoy. So I hope you'll give it a try. I hope you guys enjoyed coming along with me today. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them for me in the comment section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Make sure you check out the description box. I will leave ideas on ways to use them down there. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.